just looked down at the dirt. My mom had told me how the chicken man still did things he knowed all the way from Africa. Stuff that his grandmother done taught him. Mama also had told me he could heal the sick by the laying on of his hands. And that one time, he made a blind man see just by looking deep into his eyes. And folks said he turned people into chickens if he didn't feel what they were doing was right. That's why he was called the Chicken Man. I was kind of scared he might think I wasn't doing right, so I started walking faster. I still held my arms out steady, though, so I wouldn't break the eggs. Anyway, when I got to town, I didn't see many folk that I knew. I wandered around with my mouth gaping open, looked at the white women in their fancy hats. That's when I saw Mama's friend, Miss Nancy, turn in the corner. I was gonna sure enough be in trouble if she saw me. She told Mama everything. So I took off running toward the first big tree I saw and hid behind it. I stayed there for a minute, panting, until I saw Miss Nancy walk out of sight. Then I tiptoed in. And in my rush, I burst one of my eggs, and it was slinking down my dress and legs. Figured I'd better do what I come to do and get back home. I was standing in front of this big old building where there was a statue of a soldier sitting up on a horse. I read what it said on the building. Cole County Courthouse, Mississippi. I carefully pulled my egg out of my pocket. Right there, I cracked it one time against the horse's leg. The egg's insides dropped to the hot cement. I knelt down with my face close. I watched that egg like the old men watched the checkers before making a move. For a minute, I thought it wasn't gonna do nothing. Then, right around the edges, I saw it. One little bit was turning white. Next, the white creeped whiter and the yellow began to bubble. By golly, I was frying an egg on the cement just like folks said. I jumped up and started dancing and prancing. It was time to go home now. I'd done it. It was all over and it was true. It could get so hot you could fry an egg on the sidewalk. I started walking and wiping sweat from my face, with the eggy part of my dress sticking to me every time I took a step. My mouth was as dry as dirt, and I was mighty thirsty. That's when I spotted the water fountain. It had a little step stool so children could climb up to drink. But on the fountain was a sign that read, "Whites only." Well, I knew what that meant, so I sat down in the grass and took off my shiny black patent leather shoes. Now I only had on my clean white socks. I stepped up on that stool with those white socks hugging my feet. I was slurping up that water mighty fast when this big white man with a black and white bandana around his neck grabbed me off the stool and pushed me to the ground. The white man pointed to the sign and yelled at me, "Can't you read, girl? Why, I'm gonna whoop you till you can't sit down." His big fingers fumbled and tugged at his belt. I began to cry as a crowd of white people gathered round. They were all staring at me. Seeing all the people made me real scared, and I cried louder. I couldn't understand what the white man was so mad about. I was wearing my white socks. An old black woman from my church stepped through the crowd. She wasn't wearing anything white, but she untied her shoes and took them off. She stepped up to the fountain, bent way down, and took a drink. I knew the man was going to yell at her, and he did. "I'm going to have to whoop you too, ain't I?" he shouted. But then other black folks started coming over, removing their shoes and drinking from the fountain. They had on clean-looking green socks and yellow socks and red socks and blue socks. Of course, the big man with the bandana kept right on yelling. His face got red as fire. He was snorting through his nose like a bull does when it's on charge. Other white folk came up and started yelling at us too. By that time, the big man had ripped his belt out of his pants. He was hitting me and everybody else who was close. None of the black people moved. They just covered their faces I sat there sobbing, holding my arms over my head. All of a sudden, everybody got quiet, like